Daddy's Man, a Right On Press feature. Distributed by Right On Press. Copyright 2021, Right On ePublishing LLC. All rights reserved. Narrated by Terrence Jenkins. Part 1. Brian. Heads up, loser! I looked up in time to greet an oncoming ball with my temple. I staggered back and almost fell, had I not bumped into someone behind me, who not only held me up, but pushed me forward. The laughter around me had turned into a roar at that point. Pain exploded in the left side of my head, my eyes stinging from the impact that could have been directed at them. Well, technically, he did obey the warning. Brody saunters up to me and picks up his ball. So sorry, Brian. I honestly thought I was aiming at a wet mop. He ruffled my straight blonde hair as they all moved off, still laughing. The past year had been a very shitty one for us, according to my sister Eleanor. And Brody Sunders was one of the reasons mine had been even shittier. I had gotten into Spring Lake High hoping I would get rid of Brody and start fresh, but I had no such luck. Turns out Brody's dad couldn't send him to the snobby private school in the better part of town after all, and I was the one person he seemed to be taking it out on. 2 years ago, while we were still in middle school, he and his friends had poured a bowl of whipped cream stolen from the cafeteria all over my head, and then had taken to calling me a wet mop ever since. I put in my locker combination 3 times before I got it right. My head was really aching now, and I could feel the beginning of a welt on my temple. The tardy bell rang. Now I was going to be late, too. English Lit was first period, and Mr. Woods was a stickler for time. I reached into my backpack and sighed. Effing Brody. The ball to the head was a front. They had poured some liquid I couldn't identify into my backpack, and all my books were ruined, including my homework. Great. I didn't think it was possible for my day to get worse. I mean, one would think a dressing down by Mr. Woods, a detention slip for being late, and a 30 minutes lecture by Ms. Barnes for another ruined assignment courtesy of Brody would make the universe give me a little break. But after missing the bus and having to make the 1-hour walk home, it was sitting pretty in the driveway, looking very non-threatening. The reason my year had been shitty, and the way to make my day even shittier. The only thing keeping this scenario playing out from being a full-on nightmare was the fact that Mom wasn't home yet. She was working late today, and I guess that was why my dad was here in the first place. His car parked in the driveway like nothing had changed in the last year. I hoped he was in the basement, where Mom had chucked all of his stuff, so I could tiptoe upstairs without his detection. Once I opened the door, though, that plan went straight to hell. Hey, Bri. I was hoping I would run into you or Eleanor. That confirmed my theory then. He knew Mom was going to be late. He was carrying a dusty cardboard box, his blue eyes taking me in as he looked around nervously. Hey, Dad. I waved at him awkwardly, trying to find an appropriate use of my hands. In this moment, as the awkwardness settled over us like a wet blanket, I understood what every bully had said about me. And I almost blame myself, too. Why couldn't I make it easier for him? This discussion he was trying so badly to have with me. He cleared his throat, loudly shifting his weight. I was hoping we could talk one of these days. You haven't taken any of my calls." He sounded hurt, and I must have moved because he looked down and his eyes settled on my cell phone, clutched in my hand and waiting to bear the blame for our fractured relationship. I had never seen him look so lost, like he was drowning, and I was the only one who could save him. I opened my mouth to answer him when the basement door opened again, and another man emerged. He had raven black hair tied up in a ponytail down his back. "Hey, Gary, do you need this?" He stopped when he saw me. "Oh, hi, Brian." I was going to ask how he knew my name, but then it all made sense, and it was last summer all over again. I turned around sharply and started marching up the stairs blindly. My heart beat so hard in my chest it felt like it could break open. "Brian! Hey, Bri!" Until I felt his hands on my arm. I hadn't even heard him move. "Brian, come on. Talk to me." "You brought him here. Him!" In those few words, I had acknowledged him, his existence, what he meant for our family. "Come on, Bri. I wanted you to meet him." "You brought him here." A deep quaking started from deep within me. I clutched my hands to stop them from quaking so badly. "Don't touch me!" I yelled as I leaped into my room and locked the doors. Hiding my tears under my pillow felt like cowardice, but at the moment I didn't care. He didn't deserve to hear my tears. I could hear his soft, hitched breathing by the door. It didn't take a genius to figure out he was crying too. Dad had this soft snuffle he did whenever he cried. I knew this because Grammy had died when I was 10, and he had stood in the house he grew up in after the burial, staring out the window, and doing this soft snuffle he was doing now. I don't know how long he stayed, but I know that I fell asleep, and when I woke up, it was dinner time, and Eleanor was out at her friend's as usual, and Mom wasn't back from work. So I made myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and tried not to stare at the basement door. In a sleepy town like Spring Lake, New Jersey, where everyone knew everyone else's business, and you could have the same mailman your whole life, the one thing I knew I could not stand to forgive my father for were the gossip. The pitying glances sent our way like it was Grandma's funeral all over again, and the hushed whispers that seemed to stop every time I came by. Our last parent-teacher meeting, Mother had skipped her shift at the Spring Lake Medical Center to attend. Mrs. Ozel, the resident preacher's wife, had taken one look at her and burst into tears while giving her the most uncomfortable hug I had ever seen Mum in. Her face was red, and so was mine. And though we didn't talk about it later, we both knew she was never coming to another parent-teacher meeting. Part 2. Eleanor. It was spring the year before. Everything was okay in my world, and our family had not been irreparably split into a million tiny pieces. Marcus had just asked me out finally, and I was elated. Of course, I said yes. When the hottest guy with the most soulful eyes you had ever seen asked you out, you said yes. I had let him drive me home after their baseball game. He had kissed me very thoughtfully and gently and sent me in, so I didn't get in trouble with my parents. My euphoric high was immediately dampened by the sight I met in the living room. Dad was on the sofa. A box of letters was spread out on his lap, and he was weeping uncontrollably. I had never heard anyone cry quite like that. It wasn't the silent sobs at Grammy's funeral. It was a heaving and groaning like I would imagine it would sound like if a heart were to break. "Hey, Ellie, how was your day?" In that instant, the grieving man I had caught a glimpse of disappeared, and Dad was Dad again, cheerful, laughing, and easygoing. If I hadn't seen the transformation myself, I would not have believed it. It was okay, I guess. Are you okay, Dad? I'm good, love. Just some letters Grandma left. He waved a few for me to see as proof. No matter how long I looked at them from where I stood, I wouldn't develop X-ray vision all of a sudden and be able to read them. So I settled for believing him. You swear you're okay? I narrowed my eyes at him. Yes, baby, I'm good. The smile wouldn't reach his eyes, and he wouldn't meet mine longer than a few seconds. We never talked about that moment again, and Mom and Brian were none the wiser. In retrospect, I should have probed and sniffed like I had been prompted to, because that incident seemed to be the catalyst for the way things began and ended. The next weekend was the spring festival to mark the end of the semester and the beginning of spring break. Tony and Sheila, my best friends, threw a party at Tony's house, as was custom. Her parents were life coaches and relationship experts, and they spent most of their time traveling. And bringing Marcus was a no-brainer. Is he even real? Sheila asked me the minute Marcus got dragged off to join in some argument. What do you think? I answered, my smile firmly in place, and my cheeks so red they actually felt singed. He wouldn't even go play beer pong with the boys, Tony quipped, plopping down on the couch beside me. He said he'd rather spend the time with me. No words I had ever spoken gave me such joy. He must have it so bad, huh? Sheila said. Does he have a similarly hot and sweet brother? She asked, the picture of innocence. We only laughed at her. She and Jack Mansfield, the football quarterback, had been going steady for about a year now. In high school relationship norms, they were practically married. I better go find Marcus. He's my ride home, and I don't want him getting drunk. I got up. I bet he's a really good ride, Sheila called after me, rolling her hips suggestively. I shook my head. If only I had Sheila's confidence and proud ownership of her sexuality. Marcus was nowhere at the pool or beer pong table, and I went upstairs. The bathrooms were locked, and I was not interested in walking in on any couplings in the rooms. I was just about to text him when I heard him and Jack talking. Only what Jack said next stopped me from opening the door. So, when are you going to tap that virgin ass? Oh, come on, man. You don't have to be so crass about it. Marcus's laugh was low and drawn out. He had been drinking after all. I mean, that's why you're with her, though. No need to sugarcoat it. Still. Well, I'm just saying, if in 2 weeks you don't succeed, I get to have my turn, and you can kiss your $500 goodbye. A third voice I didn't quite recognize spoke up, clearly inebriated. Too sick to listen for more, I took the stairs 2 at a time and walked out into the night without telling anyone. I walked the 35 minutes home with leaden feet and my heart hollow, thankful it was still not too late out. My charming, too-good-to-be-true prince had turned out to be a frog after all. When I got home that night, Mom and Dad were sitting opposite from each other on the couch, their bodies held up rigidly and their motions stiff, so stiff they were like familiar strangers. Hi, sweetie. Did you have fun? Mom tried gallantly. Her eyes were swollen and red, and her voice bore the strain of pretending. What's going on? I asked, ignoring her questions and looking them over, because more than I needed to tell my dad about my horrible evening, I needed them to be okay. I had never seen Mom and Dad fight about anything. I mean, they weren't overtly affectionate with each other, But which couple with so much age and history still was, right? Nothing, baby. Dad offered me a sympathetic smile, his eyes seeming to apologize for something I hadn't figured out then. Your mom and I were just talking. Hope you had fun tonight. There it was again. Another conversation I could not be a part of. Another piece of my perfect life illusion breaking just a bit. And I was helpless to stop it. I did what every self-absorbed, shallow teenager did. Mm-hmm. I nodded and went to bed. By morning, Dad was gone, and Mom was chucking all his things down to the basement, like he would be that easy to forget. Eleanor! Eleanor, wait! I hunched my shoulders, my backpack held up higher on my back as I increased my pace. Come on, Eleanor, I just want to talk for a little while. Marcus caught up with me then, pulling gently on my straps. I figured I should stop then. I didn't want to be the source of even more gossip. What do you want, Marcus? My face was pinched so tight it actually hurt. Why in Hades would he not leave me alone? Can we at least talk about what happened now? I swear, Eleanor, I had nothing to do with that. Please believe me. First it was a little flutter in my chest. Then it bloomed into irritation. And then I was full on angry. Who did he think I was? A fool? Had he and his friends not ruined my life enough? First it was that drunken conversation I had overheard about a year ago. I had begun to avoid him afterwards, ending whatever sham our relationship was immediately. He stuck around though, like a stubborn cold, trying to figure out what it was he had done to make me hate him so much. I wouldn't even tell Sheila and Tony. I guess it was shame and embarrassment, but I didn't tell anybody. The only person I did want to tell had left last spring to go live with another man. The next was summer. After months of ignoring him, he and his friends had devised a perfect way to get back at me. Rumors of our sexcapades. Now everyone thought I had been sleeping with him. For the first few months after that, every time I walked down the halls, catcalls broke out. It took hiding out in the library and getting to every class late, spending lunch in the library or the chess room, and basically being a loner for the calls to die down. Come on, Eleanor, please talk to me. Now I was angry that the way his chocolate brown eyes caressed my face still made my heart race, and the way he still called me Eleanor instead of Ellie like everyone else made me want to believe him. You don't get to make demands on my time anymore, Marcus. Or did you place bets on this too? The look on his face, like I had struck him in the face, was all the gratification I needed as I walked away. Our house on Reed Street in downtown Spring Lake was the picture of perfect. It was warm and cozy with a whole white picket fence thing working for it. You know, the kinds of houses used to sell the American dream to immigrants, along with a minivan and 2.5 kids, until Dad suddenly decided he was in love with a man. Now, every time I went home from school, my heart would race out of control, dread dropping down in my belly like a lead ball. I dreaded Mom's now ghost-like presence. All she did was work. And when she was home, she rarely said anything anymore. I dreaded Brian's silent anger and sense of betrayal. He barely spoke to anyone now, and his grades were plummeting below sea level. The other night I had come in and Brian was locked in his room, but you could clearly hear the silent sobs through the door. It didn't take long to guess what had happened. The basement was empty of Dad's things, and Brian was probably there when he left. I would go find him today after school. I couldn't do this anymore. Mom was great and understanding and all, but Dad and I always had a language of our own. We had been very close till last year, and I could tell him everything, But now I needed someone to be there for me. He was as distant as he could ever get. Ellie, honey, what are you doing here? Dad! He looked so familiar standing there in an apron. He smelled like cinnamon cookies, and my eyes filled instantly. Honey! His eyes clouded with concern, and then he spread his hands out to me. I didn't need any other invitation. I ran into them, inhaling his scent. The rough scratch of his beard even was a welcome discomfort. We hadn't spoken to him since the divorce was final. After he moved out, he kept coming back to visit us when Mom was not around. In that time, we had held out hope that it was just a fight. After all, couples fought all the time. They would fix it. Until he asked us to lunch one day after school. We got there, and he was seated with another man. We didn't think so much of it till we realized why he was there. More than the betrayal we felt, the disappointment was even bigger. And we hadn't spoken to him since then. Not that I'm complaining, baby, but does your mom know you're here? He asked, holding me away from himself so he could look at me. I sighed. Dad had always been able to tell when I was lying to him, and everything was so painfully familiar. How had I gone so long without talking to him? He pulled me into the house then. Maybe this would be the beginning of fixing our family. Part 3. Marion. The principal had called again, this time for Brian. He had been flunking his test, and he wasn't submitting his assignments. The last time, it had been about Ellie. There had been rumors and inappropriate pictures spread in school about her. You need to talk to her about this, she had said to me. Compassion and confusion fighting for space in her eyes. I guess Spring Lake was so small, your business was everyone else's. I had waited for Ellie to tell me what was wrong, but she wouldn't say anything. I knew she was close to her father, and she hadn't spoken to him since the divorce, so I had hoped that she would confide in me, but no such luck. It broke me to see my kids in so much pain, and I knew they were taking it out on Gary. I wanted so many times to tell them there was so much more to marriage they would not understand till they got there themselves. I wanted so much to tell them it was as much my fault as it was their father's. But I was a coward. The same cowardice that made me marry a man I knew who was in love with someone else, and stuck it out with him. The same cowardice that had made me scared of calling him out for those letters he kept from a life he had sworn he left behind. The same cowardice that had made me forego my dream of being an actress because of one failed box office movie. The same cowardice that had made me sit across from my daughter at dinner for weeks, knowing how much she was suffering, but not having the courage to ask her to trust me with her pain. I guess the only thing of strength I had ever done was let him go when he was finally sure he could not take this life anymore. I don't want to hurt you anymore, May. He had sat across from me that night, tears streaming from his eyes. But I can't live like this anymore. I refused to examine that part of me that had wanted to tell him I knew he had been having an affair with him all along. But I didn't mind as long as he chose me every night. But Marion Eloise Grant had never been the girl anyone chose in the end. I had known it my whole life, and I had been okay with it till now. I was plain at best, with lank hair the color of dishwater. And when Gary Fletcher had paid me a compliment in my sophomore year of college at a party one night, I had actually believed I was beautiful. Who wouldn't want to feel like that? And like a drug, I had sought him out on every turn, wanting the next hit of his attention that would last me till the next time I saw him. Gary was everyone's golden boy. He shone and stood out brightly everywhere he went, and being beside him, some of his color always rubbed off on you, and you could never quite recover from it when you had it. The first night we had sex, he held me so tenderly and known my body so intimately. I had broken down and cried. He had cried along with me, but for very different reasons. He didn't hide it from me, though. The expectations of a family set in their ways, the self-loathing he felt for who and how he loved. He hoped I could fix him. And in a way, I know he loved me. I could see it in his eyes on some nights when he just woke up, right after the disappointment of not getting the one in his dreams. The resigned sigh that then turned into a bright smile as he pulled me close as if to say, "You're not him, but it's okay. I still choose you anyway." I should have known it wouldn't last long. Known he would wake up one day and decide he needed to choose himself. And who could blame him? I deserved this hollow feeling in my chest and my children's resentment. I had known what this choice would cost him, and I had let him make it anyway because I couldn't bear to not have his light not shining on me. This was what I got for it. I pulled into the driveway tired and stressed out from work. It was mid-morning, and I hoped Ellie and Brian were in school, as they said they would be. I was picking up more shifts at the hospital now, partly because I needed the extra money and partly to escape Brian's cold stares. I knew among the two of them, he blamed me for the divorce more. You could see it in the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes when we were in the same room, and the sullen silence he greeted everyone in the house with. He had come home one night with a bruise over his left eye and a torn shirt. When I asked him what had happened, he looked at me with such intensity I had wilted just a little bit. "What do you care anyway? It's all your fault." My phone rang, pulling me out of the elaborate pity party I had thrown for myself. It was the principal again. I groaned. Something had to give soon enough, because I was in over my head and I was well on my way to drowning. "Mom!" My senses came alive immediately. It was Brian, and he sounded like his father had sounded that night a long time ago. "Please come. Ellie needs you. She took some pills. Oh, God." The phone was snatched from his hands, and I steadied myself as the words filtered into my mind. Drugs, overdose, suicide, and I crumpled on the floor. A high-pitched sound I had never heard broke forth from my lips, and I started searching for my phone with trembling hands. I was done pretending I was brave and strong. My pride had kept me for a whole year, but this one time I was admitting defeat. I needed my friend, the one who had smiled and made everything okay those 16 years ago in college. "Marion, what's wrong?" he asked, the concern in Gary's voice almost undoing me. "It's Ellie. I need you." I knew those words were more than enough. Part 4. Gary. I watched the door long after she left, rubbing my eyes and swallowing so hard I didn't cry again. It had felt good to be needed by my daughter after all that time, and I had taken her in and let her cry like she had wanted to. No matter what had gone wrong with my marriage, I had hoped they would always still need me, but that had not been the case. They had blamed me and Marion, and that hatred they had transferred to Frank, too. "Is he—" Eleanor stood on the threshold, wringing her hands and looking around. I knew what she meant, but it hurt that they couldn't even bring themselves to say his name. It was just like my parents all over again. "No, honey, Frank's at work." He won't be back till late." "Oh." She nodded then, her shoulders relaxing a little. "I was hoping to see you sometime soon, but you and Bri don't take my calls." I tried very hard to keep the hurt out of my voice, but I'm sure she heard it. "We're having a hard time adjusting, Dad." "I know, baby." And I did. "But I really wish you wouldn't be so hard on your mother. There's so much about our marriage you guys wouldn't understand." "Then make me understand," she pleaded, tears swimming in her vision. "Did you ever really love her?" "I'll always love your mother, Ellie. In a way, she saved me, and I would never forget that." "Then why can't you be with her? Why can't you choose us?" I paused to swallow so the big lump forming in my throat could let me speak. "In a way you may never understand, Ellie. I choose your mother every day, but I hope you get to fall so completely in love someday, and you understand how complicated it could get." "How long have you known him?" she asked, a strange light coming into her eyes. "For a very long time, Ellie. Longer than I've known your mother." I watched her nod. This wasn't how I wanted to explain this to her, but I was going to take any chance I got at a relationship with my kids. "And you cheated on her with him?" The calculation in her eyes was the same I saw every time I looked in the mirror. "Yes, only for a year, before I left." I always expected honesty from them, so it was only fair I gave it back. "I guess love is a lie then." She turned away from me, and alarm bells went off in my head. This wasn't just about us. Something was wrong, and that was why she was here. "Baby, what's going on? Who hurt you?" I tried to follow her. "No one, Dad. I'm fine. I'm guessing those letters you were crying over that evening were not Grandma's after all." She was changing the subject. "No, they weren't Grammy's. Eleanor, what is going on? Talk to me, please." I don't know what it was I had said, but I saw the shutters come down over her eyes immediately. "Eleanor, don't ever call me that," she screamed. "And you lost the right to talk to me about anything the day you left Mum's bed to fuck a man." Then she was out the door as fast as she had come through it. The only testament to her presence was the lingering citrus of her shampoo. "Don't let it get to you, babe," Frank had said later that night while we cuddled. "Give them time to adjust. They'll come around. She sought you out today, didn't she?" He wiped the tears foaming on my lashes and kissed my brow. This was what made it worth it, I said to myself. This special moment with this tender, loving, and forgiving man I didn't deserve was worth all the resentment my kids threw at me. I couldn't believe I had treated him with so much callousness, and he had stayed around. Marion always told me I was the sun that brightened up her gloom, and in a way, I think she meant it. In that way, Frank was mine, my true north. No matter how long I had despised him and my feelings for him, he had always stayed true to his beliefs, making me want so bad to accept myself for who I was. The next morning we slept in late, and around 10 a.m. my cell phone rang. One look at the screen had me worried. Marion was fiercely proud and independent, and if she was calling me this early in the morning, it was urgent. "Hey, May, what's up?" Then, amidst the blustering and babbling that got through all her crying, I heard 3 words. "I need you." I was at the hospital within the hour, trailed by an equally worried Frank. I met them in the waiting room. Brian was so pale he was stark. Marion stood when she saw us come in. "What's going on? Where is she?" They're pumping her stomach right now. Oh my God, Gary. She wanted to die. Her voice broke then, and knowing what it was taking her pride to let me see her this vulnerable, I gathered her in my arms and let her cry. Over Marion's shoulder, Brian stood rigidly, staring at us. And every moment he stayed away from me, my heart broke a little more. I released Marion then and took a step towards him, letting the hope I felt shine through my eyes. He broke then, running into my arms and sobbing too. When I hugged him back, he let me. And when I let him go, he extended his trembling hand to Frank. A wordless handshake that had my heart swelling and my throat clogging up. Frank had tears in his eyes too as he accepted the gesture. In that moment, I let myself hope. Amidst this chaos and pain, we would be okay. The end. Daddy's Man, a Right On Press feature. Distributed by Right On Press. Copyright 2021, Right On ePublishing LLC. All rights reserved. Narrated by Terrence Jenkins.